Good day, folks. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, coming to you from Fresno, California, here at KXEX 1550 AM, the best talk in town. Has California had enough? You know, I've been watching Gavin Newsom, and I remember when he was first running, and everybody was like, oh, yeah, nobody could be worse than Jerry Brown. And I predicted to several friends and family that no, Gavin was going to prove that he was worse than Jerry Brown, because at least Jerry Brown once in a while had an honest moment. He would say, oh, yeah, I screwed up. Gavin, it's Trump's fault. It's climate change's fault. And what's illustrating that is what's happening with this current disaster. And I really feel for the people in LA, because it's not like they did something wrong. We've had, for now close to 20 years, a whole bunch of money approved for new reservoirs, for water storage. The environmentalists have done everything they can to stop forest management, meaning controlled burns. Gavin recently exaggerated by, 620% on how much acres have allowed controlled burns. In other words, it's amazing that Gavin doesn't poke people in the eye when he turns, because he's got a Pinocchio nose that just keeps growing. Well, if we don't allow fires to be managed, or forest to be managed, if we don't maintain roads, meaning fire access roads, if we don't allow any logging or waste regeneration, because there's people that come in for waste regeneration also, we got a problem. We got a coastal commission that very much limits what can be done. And through the coastal commission and in the environmentalists, they have actively stopped reservoir projects where we would have had some water that we could have used, whether it was airlifted through helicopters and airplanes, or it was simply shifted over to another area so that there was critical fire. Now, Gavin wants to say that it's all Trump's fault and climate change's fault. Is it really? I've been in California now for 55 years. I happen to be 55 years old. Don't remember the first 5 years very well, but after that, seems to me there's quite a number of fires, and they happen, every year. Why would you be shocked that we need fire protection? That we need to actively manage our forests so that we have small controlled burns rather than catastrophic fires like we had a couple years ago in Paradise, California, like we had last year right here in Fresno County, up around Shaver Lake, where we lost thousands of acres and quite a number of structures, and it was a catastrophic fire. And now we've moved, and just the fire shifted spots down to LA. It's no surprise California goes through a drought and rain cycle. We're right in that cycle. And every year you can expect there's going to be problems with fires. Now, interestingly, this has to do a bit with Gavin's policy. Somebody recently got tackled by citizens that was an illegal alien from Mexico that was setting fires. Now, I don't know if he set the initial fires. There seems to be no determination, but it seems rather strange that 5 fires, all geographically pretty distant from one another, all flared up essentially at once in the LA basin. And if this wasn't a surprise, then what about the mayor? Gavin does not sit alone in holding blame for this. So will this shift how Californians vote? I truly hope so, because I've been saying since the early 80s, it's time. Didn't get to vote for president until 88. That was the first time I voted for a president, but it's time. Is this a wake-up call? Is this finally the wake-up call? Even if we changed a bit around the margins and we didn't have a one-party authoritarian rule all by one party, that would make a huge difference, where maybe we could have the voice of reason occasionally. And that doesn't seem to happen in California very often. I think that's largely because so much of California doesn't realize that it is actually Lord Newsom, and we should refer to him by his proper name, Lord Newsom, and we should bow before his greatness. And even when he's caught in a lie, the man just slips through very quickly. So one of the things he got called on, now the ABC, I think it was ABC, the reporter did not really nail him, though he did call him on it when he said, every reservoir is fully filled. And then the reporter said, well, what about the one for Pacific Palisades? So that, I don't know, you could have water so that when the fire trucks went over to the fire hydrants and they hooked them up, there was some crazy thing that you could use to suppress fire called water. I don't know. Seems like a good idea that you would fill that in a situation where you knew the Santa Ana winds were coming. Those are high, difficult, powerful winds that seasonally come through the LA basin. You knew that you had lots and lots of dry wood and brush. Just seems like a normal precaution, and you'd be almost, well, incompetent if you didn't take care of that. Gavin recently cut $100 million from fire prevention or forest maintenance in the budget. $100 million. Karen Bass, mayor of Los Angeles, doubled down on that and cut another $17.6 million. Anybody wonder? It was like they were playing Russian roulette. You know, and Gavin uses his silver snake tongue to try to smooth this over. Is he really accountable? I have yet to see. He's been governor now for quite some time, years. I believe we're on his second term. And it's never his fault. It's always Trump's fault, climate change's fault, somebody else's fault. Oh, one of my favorites. He decided that the media, you know, it was hurricane winds of disinformation. So rather than be responsible for anything, it was just hurricane winds of disinformation. Anybody see a problem with that? Now, they've made green technology the priority, and they forced the two main companies in California, Southern California Edison and PG&E, to move accordingly. Now, both of those companies are highly regulated. They can't raise your rates as much as you want to get mad at PG&E. We've got a board, and everybody elected on that board either came from Governor Brown or from Lord Newsom. And that board has to approve all rate raises. California, because it wants to be all green energy, but it only wants to be certain kinds of green energy, has decided that all hydroelectric power doesn't count towards green energy. Interestingly enough, in the name of green energy, there are multiple places in South America that have started projects to develop hydroelectric power because they see it as green energy. Every way that we come across power has a downside. Wind only works when the wind is moving, and then we don't have a great way to dispose of the leftovers because those turbines are only good for a certain number of years. We don't have recycling for them. Solar's only good when the sun's out, and there's all kinds of chemicals that need to be mined or minerals that need to be mined in the production of solar. So we've just transferred some of that pollution elsewhere. So if the focus was on green energy, and they're forcing PG&E and Southern California Edison towards green energy, And if you look at the budget from 2023 for PG&E, they spent, what was it? 1.4 billion. I'm really close on this, but I'm slightly off on the numbers. 1.4 billion on fixing their infrastructure. And we'll get to infrastructure in a minute. In 2022, in 2023, I got this all wrong. They spent 2.4 in 2022. They spent 1.4 in 2023 because they shifted all of their money and work towards green energy, and they did not fix the existing problems. One of those problems is if the lines are not buried, and in some cases you can't bury them, some cases they have to be above ground. If you have old towers, and we have in some cases power lines where the pole is 100 years old. So we've got old technology up there. With high winds, if those lines come down or the pole comes down or the structure, because in some areas, particularly in the mountains here, it's a metal structure, but eventually it rusts out. If those fall and hit the ground, guess what? They cause a fire. So PG&E has started spending more money on green energy by a tremendous amount and less money on fixing our current infrastructure. Now, if we're going to focus on being green, then shouldn't we realize that one catastrophic fire is multiple times more pollution than actually managing the problem in the first place? So our priorities are wrong, which is really typical of the left. They have sometimes good ideas, mostly bad ideas that they want somebody else to pay for. And there doesn't seem to be any adult in the room. And Gavin, I don't know, it's like he's the guy that says, well, I'm in charge and the buck stops here. Oh, unless there's a problem. And then the buck stops elsewhere because he's always got somebody else to blame. I get real tired of elected officials never wanting to take responsibility when they're in charge. Something else that's crazy. Oregon. We've helped Oregon in the past when they've had big fires. They've helped us. It's great. I truly appreciate that other states are willing to step up and help us. And this isn't just Oregon, but specifically with Oregon. They sent about 100 trucks. Those 100 trucks were held up because they couldn't pass the California safety rules. Now, they're trucks that seem to operate just fine in Oregon, but we have a different set of rules. And so those trucks still have not been allowed to make it to LA. All these days later, they've been held up at the border because they can't pass the safety checks. They're fine in Oregon. This is a disaster and an emergency, and more than 1,000 structures have gone up and are now just rubble here in the LA fire, whether we're talking about Palisades or near Altadena or the other three. More than 11 people. They're expecting to find significantly more people than that have died in this. So how do we deal with this? You've got mismanagement. You've got lack of leadership. You've got lack of planning, lack of foresight. Should we vote differently? Could that make a difference? Or is it just, oh no, we need a different Democrat? Now, I don't know that Republicans are always the answer, though I'm definitely a Republican. And I believe that at least they're the party that has some common sense. They're flawed because any big group of politicians is flawed. But the Democrats, they seem to be the party of nonsense. So getting into some of that idea of nonsense, they've focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. A great example of that is, what do you think the odds of a lesbian woman being a firefighter? Pretty low if we look at by population. Now, I don't care that somebody's a lesbian firefighter. I care that they can do their job effectively and efficiently, and that should be the focus. Well, the top 3 people for LA Fire all happen to be in that same dating pool. That's a little bizarre. It's almost as if they didn't focus on, because what are the odds? Because almost no women are in firefighting. Now, I don't have a problem with women in firefighting. I just want that woman to be big enough and strong enough that if I'm stuck somewhere, they can come save me and they can pull me out. If they're not big enough and strong enough to do that, I don't know. Maybe they shouldn't be in firefighting. Also, the number 3 person for the LA Fire Department happens to be a diversity, equity, and inclusion person and makes more than the assistant chief. It's something like $300,000. I don't remember the exact number, but it was more than the assistant chief, a little less than the chief. So clearly, diversity, equity, and inclusion, rather than having effective, efficient people that focus on, I don't know, fire prevention, if a fire starts, putting a fire out. So we have the wrong focus. I think that sums it up in such a succinct way. We have just the wrong focus in California. That's why the rest of the states, when I've been out of state, I get made fun of until I actually have a conversation, because they're like, well, your government's crazy. I'm like, yeah, but not all of us are crazy. Let's have a conversation. By the time I'm done, they realize, no, not all of us are crazy. And they're like, but you still have to be a little crazy because you're there and you're putting up with it. And I say, no, I'm not putting up with it. Just not enough people are joining me in the fight against the insanity. So again, have you had enough? If you've had enough, let me know in the comments. Now, for my radio people, you could also call the station, let them know, hey, we've had enough. Now, I'm going to show you a video of a woman that confronted Gavin. And Gavin got caught lying. He pretends he's talking to the president. He wasn't actually talking to the president. We need more of this. We need to confront in a polite manner elected officials that are not efficient, that are incompetent, and that lie.
Then Rachel spots a face she recognizes.
Is that Gavin Newsom? That's the governor. That's the governor. Governor, I live here, governor. That was my daughter's school, governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is being criticized by some for water mismanagement as hydrants ran dry while fires multiplied.
So I have to get self-service.
So let's get it. Let's get it. I want to be here when you call the president.
I appreciate it. I'm doing that right now. And it's to immediately get reimbursements, individual assistance, and to help you. I'm devastated. I'm so sorry, especially for your daughter. I have 4 kids. Losing the school.
Everyone who went to school there, they lost their homes. They lost 2 homes because they were living in one building another. Governor, please tell me, what are you going to do with the president right now?
We're getting the resources to help rebuild.
Why was there no water in the hydrants, Governor?
That's all literally.
Is it going to be different next time?
It has to be. Has to be. Of course.
What are you going to do?
I'm doing
to fill the hydrants. I would fill them up personally. You know that.
I literally have.
I would fill up the hydrants myself.
I understand.
But would you do that?
I would do whatever I can.
But you're not. I see do you know there's water dripping over there, Governor? There's water coming out there. You can use it.
Diminishing winds are bringing some respite for firefighters, but it's likely to be brief. As estimated losses surge, there is still zero containment of this fire. Officials say they don't know the death toll. Dogs will be brought in to search this rubble for fatalities. Jeffrey and his partner Nicole are returning to their seaside community, once a little slice of paradise.
Each one is an individual neighbor. So this was my dearest friend, Gayleen, who I've known for my whole life, 35 years. That was our clubhouse where we play pool every Friday. That was Ben's house. These are like my closest friends here.
They sift through the dust. In a plastic box, everything they can find. A turtle figurine, a garden gnome, a house name plaque. It's very little, but in a place where the loss is so huge, it means so much.
Gavin was clearly willing to lie. And did you see how incredibly slickly he did that? He's like a professional liar. And yet he says the hurricane winds of disinformation are what are the problem. So he's for censorship because he doesn't want to fix the problem. He just thinks, well, if you're not able to know about the problem, that fixes the problem. Why, that sounds like royalty, Lord Gavin. And we were founded on, no, we weren't. We were founded on individual freedom. What do you know? And we're putting up with it. Why are we putting up with it? We're going to go ahead and go to break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Someday I'll learn my cues, but we made it through. Welcome back. I was looking through Twitter, and there's somebody of the Twitter handle name or X handle name Wall Street Ape. And LA had money for LGBTQ events, but they cut $17.6 million from the fire department. In addition, Lord Gavin, in his infinite wisdom, decided to cut $100 million from forest management. Now, only a portion would affect LA. And the results of that, 11 dead, thousands of structures burned, $154 billion needed from the federal government is what they're projecting the cost of this. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case, but $154 billion, that's crazy money. Getting back to Wall Street Ape, California Governor Gavin Newsom, paid off by PG&E, he hired at their incompetent people, and now in Los Angeles is burning to the ground. Did you know that PG&E donated huge money to Gavin Newsom? Just huge money. $750K. The Los Angeles water chief who failed to make sure LA had water, who's making $750,000 a year, was hired from PG&E. PG&E paid Gavin Newsom when he was elected in 2018. Additional payments made to the Gavin Newsom and his wife for more than $700,000 from PG&E. Maybe that explains how Gavin can afford a $20 million mansion on the governor's budget. You know, on his governor's salary. There's a problem here. And I put Gavin kind of in the category with Nancy Pelosi, corrupt politician who manipulates the rules of the House to make money in the stock market. You know, something comes up before the House, and magically her husband knows exactly the right thing to do that relates to legislation before the House. And she's made, or her husband's made millions. Technically, it's not her. Well, I think Gavin's right in that same kickback, corrupt politician kind of guy. Now, these fires aren't even under control. We're not even close. Now, these numbers are a day old. Pacific Palisades, that's the biggest fire, or at least the one that took out the most structure. Think of it as a little north of Santa Monica, on the coast, very mountainous region, lots of expensive homes. You know, I couldn't afford to live there. Good for those people that can. I'm not jealous of somebody who has more money than me and don't think they should be punished for their success. But a whole lot of California does think should be punished for their success. Not only should they pay more taxes, but why even the LA Fire Department believes in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Altadena fire, that's the one relatively close to Pasadena. That's inland by 50 miles, maybe 45 miles. That was about 15% contained. This problem isn't over. I will get to see some of it in person before I'm headed to LA. It's just insane to me that this is happening. Have we had enough? I keep asking that question because are you moved to action? You know, it's no big deal for me to get 1,000 people to listen to this show, and thank you for that. Often, it's 2,000 people. How many of you have moved to action? Even if you did one thing, something simple like talk to your family, changed yourself and became an activist. You know, there's a civic duty, and we all have a responsibility. Whether you're religious or not, there's a responsibility to help your community. And I get that some of us are struggling. You know, California has the highest poverty rate in the nation, the biggest divide between the poor and the rich. Yet we're run by authoritarian socialists. Yet we have the biggest divide between the rich and the poor. Does that make sense? Somebody's not doing something right. And California has been in total control of one party now for more than 2 decades. Biggest divide. We have the most homeless. Not just because we're the biggest state, we have 40% of all homeless. We have $24 billion last year that we spent on homeless to fix the problem. And this is typical of liberal results. We have no idea. The money's not accountable. And we have no improvement in the number of homeless. I do know they did, because a little bit of the money is known, in LA. They were making small apartment buildings to house the homeless at $1 million per unit. Small. Now, I get that housing is more expensive in LA than where I live in Fresno County. But that's just insane. So 24 billion with a B got spent on homeless, and we got more homeless. We didn't fix the problem. That is very typical of the results of Gavin Newsom. And it's very typical of the results of the state legislature, which again is a supermajority of socialist leftists who like to go by the name Democrat. You think there might be a problem, folks? We're going to go ahead and go to our second video. This one's fairly short. This is one where you get to hear in Gavin's own words how he calls for censorship.
We've got to deal with this misinformation. There are hurricane force winds of mis and disinformation, lies. People want to divide this country, and we're going to have to address that as well. And it breaks my heart as people are suffering and struggling.
So that was Gavin Newsom on a Zoom call with incompetent Joe Biden, talking about the winds of misinformation and disinformation. In other words, if you dare to criticize Lord Newsom, then clearly it must be disinformation or misinformation. It's not that we could, have free speech and maybe come to different conclusions. But no, he is called for directly to the president through government to censor your voice. I hope this means Gavin's done. I think he should resign. Actually, probably in my view, the first 6 months he was maybe not as horrible because he hadn't got his footing. So about 6 years ago he should have resigned. But now it's apparent to everybody. I truly hope this means he's done. I don't know that he'll resign because I think the man is a narcissist, because he believes in his ability to lie through. Now, we listened to that earlier video where the woman confronts him, and without missing a beat, oh yeah, I'm talking to the president now. And she says, well, I want to hear that. Remember that, folks? Oh, well, I've been trying to call him. Now, anybody that has any connection to the military would realize, if you have a conversation with them, the military has satellite phones. Lord Newsom presides over the 5th largest economy in the world, if we looked at California as just as a country even instead of a state. And you're telling me that Lord Gavin went to a disaster area, somehow didn't have a satellite phone so that he could communicate if he felt he needed to, and he just had his cell phone. I think he was down there for a photo op, and when somebody called him on his BS, what'd he do? He lied. Oh, well, I've been trying to call the governor. Excuse me. He is the governor. I've been trying to call the president. Huh. Oh, wait, I'm sure that's just misinformation and disinformation. So don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe what your ears just told you. Because clearly, it couldn't be wrong. You've got a mayor who's a trained Marxist. You aware of that? Karen Bass, on a regular basis, now for years, has been going every year to Cuba. She's been going long enough that she was known by Fidel Castro. And he inspired her to start a group. And for the life of me, I did not write it down and I can't remember the name of the group, but it's a Marxist group. They're terrorists. Now, is she on the outside of that group? I hope so. I hope she's not actually a terrorist, but she founded the group and now they've been involved in terrorist acts. Well, that's just crazy. And not just that, the mayor, and again, I think she's trying to get Gavin's job because she realizes she wouldn't have to be accountable if the state is run by one party. She left for the west coast of Africa in a nation called Ghana, just as the Santa Ana winds were coming, just as she knew it was fire season. Now, ironically, she criticized Trump for going on a trip, but then she went on a trip. Oh, wait, we can't be consistent. Never mind. I don't know. And she focuses on LGBTQ. This should say something. One of the very big liberal papers, New York Times being the biggest one, but LA Times is pretty darn big. The owner of the LA Times just came out and publicly said, I regret endorsing LA Mayor Karen Bass. So they're starting to eat their own. They're trying to cover their butts. I don't know that he necessarily, if you were okay with a trained Marxist in the first place, and suddenly you realized it was an incompetent trained Marxist, I think his problem is that she's incompetent, not that she's a trained Marxist. So while Gavin cut $100 million from the fire prevention budget, Karen Bass added another $16.7 billion cut to the LA Fire Department. Gavin decided he needed to spend $25 million initially to fight Trump. Because Trump might, I don't know, deport somebody who was here illegally, especially those that are criminals. Well, the legislature just got back together with Lord Gavin, and they followed his royal decree and decided that they needed another $25 million. So we've got $100 million cut from fire prevention and done in the name of we're out of money. But they just spent a total of $50 million to fight Trump so that they can sue him in court when he tries to deport, because he said his focus, number one, will be to get rid of criminals. They're going to fight him and stop him, if they can, from deporting criminals. Yet Trump is supposed to pay for all this, pay for this disaster through federal money. I think that because of the incompetence and how we've managed things, that I hope that they put some strings on that federal money. I really do. And Congress has been talking about that. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, has talked about that. He wouldn't get into specifics. Other congressmen have come before, mostly Republicans, but have come before the press and talked about needing to tie California's hands. Well, if everything's climate change or Trump's fault and they give California a bunch of money to distribute to the people, do you really think it's going to get to the people? They've said that climate change is the greatest existential threat. Yet when we have a catastrophic wildfire, we have, because they say carbon's the big problem. And it used to be global cooling back when I was a little kid. And then all of a sudden it was global warming. And now we're calling it climate change. Yes, my producer, please look that up. I am dead on right on that. The planet was going to die within 10 years because of global cooling and almost all of humanity would die. Then it was global warming. And now it's climate change because that's more convenient, so that no matter what the climate does, well, the climate's changing. And if you watch the Weather Channel outside of LA, that pretty much has the same weather almost every day. Not quite.
You are correct. I see it here.
What do you know?
In the 1870s, when you were born, they talked about the no, not in the 70s.
I'm old, but not quite that old.
Yeah, it was popular in the 70s, yeah. Okay.
So just a crazy thought. So again, $50 million to fight Trump. Suddenly we've got money, but we're broke. Do you remember when the governor just a few months ago said we were $9 billion in debt? And the legislature said, no, we're closer to $20 million. Excuse me. I need to add a B. It's not million, it's billion. Governor said we were $9 billion in debt. Legislature said, no, it's much higher than that, more than double that. And then some independent analysts said, oh no, it's way more than that. So we went from broke to suddenly we have $50 million to throw at lawsuits. We can waste money in that way. Gavin expects no responsibility. He's the boss. He's the CEO. It used to be the buck stops here. And now his mantra is instead it's climate change and Trump's fault. I imagine last time he had a hair out of place, he blamed Trump. Because why wouldn't you? I stubbed my toe the other day and I was like, darn that Trump. Because let's see, we're not responsible for our own behaviors, right? Or are we? And when you choose to be in charge, when you decide to be elected and in charge, well, shouldn't you do something that shows leadership? Leadership means that when something happens, the buck stops. My grandpa was a Marine Corps officer, and he was not a man of excuses. We have created soft, weak men that are men of excuses rather than I'm responsible for my choices and my actions. I think largely that's because one party has decided that you need to be looked at by your tribe, by your gender, by your pretend gender, because some people have not just genders, but we also have pretend genders. And those are the most important things. So your race, your skin color, who you sleep with, what gender you pretend to be, those are the most important things. And then the only way for you to have a successful life, since you're a victim, unless, of course, you're a white male, because we're the exception. We're the oppressors and the evil ones, just so you know from their perspective. The only way for you to have a successful life is to have more government, to give up your freedoms, for getting back to that misinformation, disinformation, hurricane winds. The whole idea that you can't and shouldn't criticize government. And that's where Gavin was going. He was talking to the president, not about the plight of the people in LA. He was talking to him about how we needed to censor so that I could cover my butt easier. Really, that's what it translates to. How I could cover my butt easier. We're going to go ahead and go to our last break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. And has California had enough? Might we actually vote differently? Might we do something differently? The definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Maybe we elect an independent. Maybe I could hope and we'd elect a Republican, because I think that if we were able to pick one good candidate, we got too many governor candidates right now running on the Republican side. Looks like Chad Bianco, Riverside County Sheriff, is going to run. It looks like Brian Dahle, who ran last cycle, loser Republican from Northern California, who was weak, pitiful, sad, embarrassing in his debate with Gavin Newsom, and should automatically, even though he bought the nomination from the party, magically he got the nomination just days before, when he gave a whole bunch of money to the Republican Party, or it was his wife did. So hope it's not Brian Dahle, because I think we're going to lose again. You've got Leo Zaki. I don't know, he's an outside candidate, but man, he has the gift for gab, and he's a lot of fun. I hope I have him on. You've got possibly Steve Hilton. That one intrigues me. Though he's done a lot in the Central Valley to help people. Smart guy. Now, he has the disadvantage of being white, but he is an immigrant, which should be a bonus. And he's right on policy. Smart guy, like him. Hope that happens. You've got Daniel Mercury, who's running again. Can very much see him as a dark horse candidate. Don't think he has much of a shot, but he's truly conservative. He truly believes in liberty. Good guy. I just hope that we don't have so many candidates that we can't make it to the top two. And so I would say, if things don't shift relatively soon, all of those people at the bottom end that are sucking off 2% and 3%, if you can't break through, you need to get out. Now, we're not quite at that critical time because filings haven't happened yet. But people are looking with anticipation, going, oh, Gavin will be gone. Maybe a new day can open in California. Keep in mind, during BLM, during all those riots that happened in LA and Seattle and Portland and Minneapolis, and I'm missing somewhere else. Chicago was one of the other big places, New York. But specifically in California, looting was just ignored. It was fine because it was businesses. Now we've got looting, and they brought in the National Guard. Before, oh no, we don't need the National Guard. Trump offered it. We don't need the National Guard. But now that they're looting homes, we got the National Guard, and Lord Newsom is saying, oh no, I don't believe in looting. Well, guess what? If they stole less than $1,000 worth of stuff, with our California laws up till just recently, where California had a huge moment of hope, where we made crime again, there was no consequences if you broke in a house, and between the damages and what you stole, it was still less than $1,000. So Gavin can claim that looting wasn't illegal, but their policy made it legal. Or if we don't say legal, because you could still get a misdemeanor ticket and they'd slap you on the wrist and go, no, bad. I don't see any consequences or any teeth in that. So I'm hoping that will really make a difference with people. So where's the hope in this? How do we fix this? Obviously, we need to vote different, but it's not enough that you vote different. Can you bring one person along with you? Can you awaken one person? That's my challenge to each one of you. Can you awaken one person? If all of us that are listening in this audience, let's say we have 1,000 people, there's 2,000 people that could shift their county, because we got to take this back one place at a time. Whether that's a city council seat, electing people that believe in your values, whether that's school board or it's something higher. It's maybe board of supervisors that sets policy for the whole county. We can do this, but we have to work. Now, there's lots and lots of existing groups that are already organized. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, if you don't have a group in your county, well, look up your Republican Central Committee. They're often flawed, but they're a great place to start. So you put in your county. You go do a search on the web. You put in your county, and you put Republican Central Committee. Or just, let's say it's Shasta County. Shasta County Republican Party. You'll find their website. Because all 58 counties here in California have a website. They have a party. If they're not quite for you, but you still passionately believe in freedom, there's lots of groups. CRA, California Republican Assembly. RNHA, Republican National Hispanic Assembly. Constitutionalist for California. Carl DeMaio, Reform California. Carl DeMaio is now a elected, is he senator? He's assemblyman, but he leads a movement called Reform California that is pretty darn conservative. Highly interesting to me because he is and happens to be a gay man who is pretty darn conservative. Even groups that traditionally did not ally with Republicans have had enough. Well, in this last election, a whole bunch of territory shifted towards Trump. California's redder than it ever has been. He shifted it by about 5 points, which meant a whole lot of counties that were near the precipice of whether they were red or green, or red or blue. Now all of a sudden they're red. These are moments of hope, but we have to seize on it as we change the culture. This country was founded on the idea of individual liberty and those liberties being granted by God, so they can't be taken away. Yet people like Lord Newsom want to take your liberties away because he's willing to label anything that you say that he doesn't like as misinformation or disinformation. There's a problem with that. Huge problem from my perspective. So, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Find a group. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Hey, we all go out to eat once in a while. When you're out at a social activity, don't be afraid to talk about your values, talking about politics. Maybe we should do it in a polite way. It shouldn't be the third rail. It should be, here's how I believe our country should be run. You should make your voice heard. You shouldn't hide. I'm also going to end with a video of a rock star, non-traditional place, singing Amazing Grace. I think this is powerful. It leaves me hopeful.
Was blind.